And next in our text, we're going to see the Song of Mary. We've seen the visit, and now we'll see the song. For you technical people, this is the first of 4 different nativity hymns at the beginning of Luke's gospel. If you fast forward a couple slides for me, if you would. The 4 different hymns in Luke's gospel are as follows on the screen. We have Mary's Magnificat. We have Zachariah's Benedictus. Then we have the angels' Gloria in Excelsis Deo. And then finally, we have Simeon's Nunc Dimittis. Those are kind of strange words, maybe to your ears, a little unusual. They're all taken from the Latin translation of the beginning of those 4 hymns. And so let's say those 4 hymns together, shall we? The Magnificat, the Benedictus, the Gloria in Excelsis Deo, and the Nunc Dimittis. Good job. Now you might wonder, why does Luke include these songs? And the answer is, number 1, it's a way of forcing us, the reader, to slow down, to take in all that has happened here. Like in an opera, the action stops so that the situation can be savored more deeply. That's what's going on here. It causes us to pause. Number 2, I have this t-shirt that I like to wear sometimes that simply says, "The gospel is so good, it has to be sung." The gospel deserves to be a song of praise and worship to our God. And they knew about this back in the first century, and they began to incorporate hymns of worship and song into their liturgy. The Bible's full of songs, the Song of Moses, the Song of Deborah, the Song of Hannah. One commentator said that these 4 songs of Luke 1 and 2 are songs of transition. They are both simultaneously the last of all of the Hebrew Psalms and the first ever Christmas carols. And so this first song is Mary's song. It's called the Magnificat. And I want to offer a special challenge here for the mothers in the room. My challenge is for you to memorize the Magnificat. Now, there's nothing wrong with you men memorizing this either. It will be a blessing to you. But I do think it's a particular blessing to the mothers in the room and the souls of women. So, ladies, here's my challenge. Between now and next Sunday, memorize the Magnificat. If you do that, you will never regret it, and the words of this Song of Mary will come to your mind over and over again, and it will be a great blessing to you. Now, allow me just to read this song to you. And Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he has looked on the humble estate of his servant. For behold, from now on, all generations will call me blessed. For he who is mighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. And his mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the mighty from their thrones and exalted those of humble estate. He's filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he sent away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, as he spoke to our fathers, to Abraham, and to his offspring forever." Wow. A few observations about this incredible song. First of all, did you notice Mary knows her Bible? This psalm of praise sounds like something David wrote. It has echoes of the Song of Hannah. If you're a careful Bible scholar, you'd notice that she also has quotations or allusions from Genesis, Deuteronomy, 1st and 2nd Samuel, Job, Psalms, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Micah, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah. Mary knows the scriptures, and they come pouring out of her with this song of praise. Like it was said of John Bunyan, if you prick him, he bleeds bibline. She just bleeds the Bible when she bursts into song. Secondarily, notice the opening line here. She begins by saying, "My soul magnifies the Lord." Now, to magnify means to enlarge something, as a magnifying glass enlarges whatever's being looked at. But what exactly are we enlarging here? Well, it can't be God. God doesn't need to be enlarged. What needs to be enlarged is my understanding of God. It's my vision of God. Because like all of us, our understanding of God is often too small, especially in those times of darkness. And so God needs to be magnified. And we need to remember how majestic he is. As Psalm 34 says, magnify the Lord with me. Come, let us exalt his name forever. Notice also she praises God for many of his attributes. Did you catch them? For his might, and for his holiness, and for his mercy, and for his strength. There is great theology about the person of God here in the Magnificat. So many of the great hymns of the faith contain such rich theology, and this is no exception. This week I was just listening to the words of O little town of Bethlehem. How still we see thee lie. Above thy deep and dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by. Yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. For Christ is born of Mary, and gathered all above, while mortals sleep, the angels keep their watch of wondering love. O morning stars together proclaim thy holy birth, and praises sing to God the King, and peace to men on earth. There's such rich and profound theology in a good song, and the Magnificat is no exception. It magnifies our vision of God. It expands our understanding of who God is. Finally, notice in the Magnificat there are two different sections to this psalm. I don't want you to miss them. The first section, in the first half, we see that God blesses the humble. And the second section, in the second half, is that God humbles the proud. This is what our God has always done in the past, whether it's Pharaoh or Nebuchadnezzar or Goliath or the Philistines. God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. God will overthrow every proud nation. He will humble every proud heart. This includes me and anyone who boasts in anything but the Lord, who boasts in their intellect or their position or their wealth. We must be reminded of the words of Jeremiah the prophet. Let not the rich man boast in his riches, or the wise man boast in his wisdom, or the strong man boast in his strength, but let him who boasts boast in this, that he knows and understands me, the Lord our God. The great preacher Martin Lloyd-Jones said about the Magnificat, quote, everything that man boasts in is utterly demolished by this Son of God, unquote. The Son of God is not born here into an aristocratic family, but a poor one. He identifies with the least of these, even in his birth. Isn't it something that when it came time for Christmas, that God bypassed all of the most important people in the world at this time? If you were part of the marketing team, if you were part of the PR committee that was deciding how are we going to roll out the Son of God coming into this world, is this how you would do it? God comes to the humble. He doesn't come to the philosophers of this age or to the Caesar or to the most important people in Rome. No, he comes to Mary, the perfect example of a humble servant. She's poor, she's young, she's a peasant girl from Nowheresville, Nazareth. She's a nobody, and she knows she's a nobody. And she also knows she's a sinner who needs a Savior. And she rejoices in God, her Savior. And God in his grace sees her in her lowly condition and blesses her with these good gifts. Friends, the blessing of God comes upon those who will humble themselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. I was always told when I was growing up, actions speak louder than words. Did anybody's mom ever tell you actions speak louder than words? Yeah, that's good advice. If that's true, and it is, what do we learn about God through his actions here in this text? I submit to you what we learn about God here is that we have a God who's humble. We serve a God who's humble, who condescends, who came not to be served but to serve. And in our world surrounded by people who are so full of themselves, whether it's politicians or professional athletes or Hollywood elites, strutting around, showing off their fame and their power and their prestige. This is really something to behold. A God who's humble. If the humility of God is such a central theme in the Bible and such a major characteristic of our God, why is this theme not given more attention? One of my professors, Dr. Glenn Kreider at DTS, said the reason is this, quote, "I suspect that the humility of God is difficult for us to accept because of the implications that such a doctrine would have on our lives." In other words, if I believe that God is humble, the obvious implication for me there is I ought to be humble too. If I serve a God who is humble and who gives up his rights, the obvious implication is that I ought to give up my rights. If we have a God who's humble, who looks first to the interests of others, the obvious implication there is I ought to also look first to the interests of others. We have a God who's humble, and we ought to follow in his steps. Friends, what we're going to see throughout this series on the Gospel of Luke is that we have a Messiah who will turn this world totally upside down. Luke's gospel will share this theme with us repeatedly over the course of this entire series, whether it's the story of the rich man and Lazarus at Luke 16, or the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector in Luke 18. Over and over and over again, Luke will continue to tell us that God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And so this is the song of Mary. This is the Magnificat, as she rejoices in the spiritual blessings that she, a humble servant, is given by God. But friends, those same spiritual blessings are available to all believers who will humble themselves under the feet of Christ. So this is good news, and we rejoice with her.